I don't think it's a controversial statement to say we're witnessing one of the greatest F1 seasons by a single driver in the history of the sport. If any of you who are newer fans ever wondered what it was like to watch Ferrari in the early 2000s or McLaren back in the late 80s, it looked a lot like Max Verstappen in 2023. With a season as dominant as this one, it got me thinking, could we start to see some of the most prestigious records in this sport starting to fall? Is the Wikipedia just going to be absolutely plastered in Dutch flags? I'm that F1 green screen guy on YouTube, aka Mr. V, and today we're going to take a look at some of the records Max could end up breaking by the time we reach the checkered flag in Abu Dhabi this year. There's some wild stuff on this list, but Max and Red Bull are having a wild season, so nothing is off the table. Up first, we have the obvious one. The big boy wins in a season. After 12 races, Max has 10. The record is 15, set by Max Verstappen in 2022. With 10 races left, in theory, he could bump his tally this year up to 20 races in a season. With the season that Max is having, does somewhere between 16 and 20 seem reasonable, setting a new record? Hell yes! It really feels like it would be crazy if he didn't finish P1 in any race at the moment. My prediction is that he will end the season getting maybe 18 or 19. There's always one random race where he has an engine failure or gets rear-ended at turn 1, something of that nature. You never win all of them. But in general, I would expect him to be winning most of what we have left. Definitely at least 5. For our first record on the list, I'm going with likelihood high. If Max does go on to win every remaining race this season, what does that do to the percentage wins in a season record? Well, Max is currently on 83.3%. The record, 75%. Yeah, this one seems pretty likely as well. If he does get 20 wins out of 22 races, that's a 90.9% win rate. Absolutely demolishing this record. That's mad. Max only needs 17 wins to break this record. Can I just take a minute to acknowledge that sentence? Max only needs 17 wins. Pretty incredible stuff. It seems, unless Checo makes some kind of deal with the devil to gain the powers of Alain Prost, there's not really much that's going to stop Max. I'm giving this one a high likelihood as well. One of the most legendary records in F1's history is Sebastian Vettel's 9 consecutive wins from the 2013 season. 10 years later, this has become a thing of myth. Verstappen is currently on 8 in a row. Where's the next race again? Right, okay, I think we can all see what's going to happen here. Well, at least the race afterwards isn't one with huge long straights that benefits Red Bull. It's Monza. Okay. Again, I'm giving this one a high likelihood. I could see McLaren or maybe Mercedes putting up a fight in Zandvoort. Hamilton did take pole in Hungary, which is quite a similar track to Zandvoort. But pole is not a win. Does anyone have the race pace to challenge Max in the Netherlands? I don't think so. Odds are he gets his 9th win in a row in front of the Orange Army in Zandvoort, and then goes on to upset a lot of Ferrari fans when he breaks the record with 10 in Monza. How far could he go? This record is not limited by seasons. At the end of the year, he could have 18 in a row, but that's not necessarily the end of that. Only time will tell how far Verstappen could go. Slightly more controversial, but we are talking about all the records he could break, and well, he could break this one. The record for wins in a season without winning the World Drivers' Championship was set by Hamilton in 2016. 10. Lewis is also second on this list with 8 wins in 2021. Not a fun statistic if your name is Lewis Hamilton. In theory, if Max wins the next 5 races, but then DNFs the final 5 and scores nothing in the sprint races, and Checo gets 5 P2s, 5 P1s, 3 sprint wins, and 10 fastest laps, Checo will be the champion in 2023. Does that sound unrealistic? That's because it is. I don't really see a situation at all in any circumstance where Max isn't the World Drivers' Championship, unless he gets disqualified. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. And so while this record is possible, the chances are very, very, very low. The last record about wins is the career all-time list. Now, obviously, Verstappen can't get number 1 this year. That spot is held by Hamilton with 103 wins. There's not enough races left this season. But in the most terrifying statistic you might hear today, by the end of this season, Max could be P3 on this list. 3rd most wins all time. What the actual front wing bias? He will be 26 years old at the end of this season, 3rd all time. But then again, looks like it might happen. For Verstappen to just equal Vettel's 43 career wins, he needs 8 more. Doesn't seem ridiculous. And that's just this season. Unless Max decides that he's had enough and retires relatively early in the next few years, we could see him finishing his career right up there with Schumacher and Hamilton. Even by the time we get to the new engine regulations in 2026, Verstappen could quite easily, by the look of it, have a win tally somewhere around 80 or 90. Likelihood of overtaking Vettel for number 3 all-time this season? I would say medium. Moving on from wins to poles, we go to an area where Max isn't quite as dominant. The record for poles in a season is 15, set by Vettel in 2011. Max currently is on 7. That obviously means he needs 8 of the remaining 10 races just to tie this record. Considering he's only just over 50% so far this season, it seems very unlikely this is going to happen. Talking about the percentage of poles in a season, could Max even beat that record, even if he gets 10 more in the 10 remaining races? His 7 out of 12 so far puts him at 58.3%. The record, however, stands at 87.5%, 14 poles from 16 races, set by Nigel Mansell in 1992. Nigel, that is filth. Even if Max gets all 10 remaining poles this season, he will finish with a 77.3% pole rate, which puts him 6th on this list. What the hell? The fact that he can only get P6 on this list is actually just as wild as some of the other things in this video. Like, to have a season as dominant as this one and not even crack the top 5. What even is Formula 1? That's not to say that Max is poor in qualifying. He knows what he's doing. That man is clearly setting up his car to dominate in the race, and the race alone. If he has to sacrifice a pole and instead qualify, P2, P3, he's gonna do it. It doesn't exactly stop him. Although Max cannot take the percentage poles record, Mansell does have another record from 1992 which Max could take. Wins from pole in a season. Nigel's record is 9, and considering Max is already on 7, yeah, this could happen. If Max gets pole in any given race, he will win, basically. The tricky part really is actually getting the pole. I can see Max getting 3 or 4 more, taking the start of the season as an example. Honestly, 5 or 6 is reasonable, and so feasibly, he could end up with something like 14 wins from pole this season. Beating 9 to take the record? Very likely. I rate this one high. The final record around poles that could fall is consecutive poles. Max is currently on 1. But he was on a streak of 5 before Hungary. The record sits at 8, set by Ayrton Senna between the 1988 and 1989 seasons. While this record is possible, I'm going to have to say likelihood low. Considering recent form, I think there's a good chance we could see a Norris or Piastri pole in the upcoming races, maybe a Hamilton or Russell in places like Zandvoort, a Perez, why not? And then always Leclerc can sneak in when you least expect him. As we saw in Spa, considering being quickest in Q3 but then getting a penalty that takes you down the grid does not count as a pole position, I don't see this record really falling in modern Formula 1. I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw Max taking a new engine in somewhere like Monza, or Qatar, or Mexico. That's just kind of how modern Formula 1 works. Max taking 9 poles in a row to break this record is going to have to be a low in the likelihood column. Podiums! Max currently has 12, i.e. all of them. The record? 18, set by Max in 2021. Could he get all 22? It's looking more and more like that Red Bull is absolutely bulletproof, so I'm going to say absolutely. Only one driver in history has stood on every podium in a season, Michael Schumacher in 2002. Likelihood of Max getting 19 and breaking this record? High. Likelihood of Max getting all 22 podiums this season? Engine penalties where you start P20 are a thing, but But then again, if anyone is going to start P20 and still gets the podium, is this guy. Likelihood of 22, also pretty high. Following on from that, Max is currently on a 13 podium streak since Abu Dhabi last year. The longest ever streak of podiums in a row is 19, set by Schumacher between 2001 and 2002. 7 more in a row to break this record? Yeah, pretty high likelihood again. The record for points in a season is 454, set by Verstappen last year. This year, Max is already on 314, and the summer break. If he carries on at this rate, he will have about 570. The maximum possible points is 598. This dude is so consistent, he's only dropped 24 of the possible maximum points so far this season. He only needs an average of P3 for the rest of the season to still beat this record. What the hell? Likelihood? High. Max currently has 6 fastest laps. The record is 10, set by Schumacher 2004. Considering Max has half of them so far, it would make sense that he finishes the season with 11. However, do consider, teams in the fight for 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the Constructors' Championship are going to be going for these things like crazy. For Max, on the other hand, it's completely unnecessary, and so Red Bull aren't really going to support him in doing this. Why would they pit him from the lead to put on a fresh set of tyres when pitting brings about its own risks? There's just no need. We have already seen this start to happen in Belgium when Max's request for a pit stop was denied. Max will likely get a few more, but I would say this record is a low likelihood. In modern Formula 1, it can be quite a risk trying to go purple. This last group of records I'm putting into a category that I call dominance. You'll see why. The record for earliest World Drivers' Champion confirmation was set by Schumacher in 2002, when he was crowned champion with 6 races left to go. Sadly for Max, Checo's P2 in Belgium has actually made 7 impossible. Before Spa, it was possible, in theory, for Max to clinch the title in Singapore, with 7 races still on the calendar. However, we will now need to wait until at least Japan to know who our champion is. It's most likely that we will then have to wait even longer, because Perez should be raking in several more P2s, P3s, or points in general, which will keep him in contention until later in the season. Mathematical contention, I should say, which is quite different to actual contention. Esteban Ocon is still in mathematical contention, but yeah. Considering that Max will likely clinch this title with only 2 or 3 races left to go, it makes Schumacher's record from 2002 even more impressive. But then considering it more, second place in the championship and also his teammate Rubens Barrichello started the season with 3 DNFs and then went on to have 2 more did not starts for good measure. And so by the time they all got to the French Grand Prix, Barrichello was fully rinsed. Still an impressive record, don't get me wrong, but you know, context. Yeah. In 2013, Vettel won the driver's title with a 155-point lead over Alonso, P2. Max is already 125 points ahead of Perez. At this rate, the gap at the end of the season will be around 220 points, a new record. In theory, it could be as high as 409 points if Max gets all possible remaining points and Checo gets none, and also everyone else gets almost none. That would require a lot of DNFs and also some very unusual changes in pace up and down the grid for the rest of the season. It's possible. It is possible. It's not going to happen though. But Max finishing with a lead of more than 155, very, very possible. This one isn't directly a record that Max would hold, but it is definitely one that he could contribute to. The lowest number of race winners in a year is 3, which has actually happened 6 times in the history of the sport since 1950. The most recent times this happened were the 2015 season and 2014 before that. With the way things are going, we may end up this season with only Max and Checo stood on the top step of the podium. It's crazy to think that even in the most dominant seasons from Formula 1 history, at least one driver from outside the top team has always managed to sneak a win. Always. But given Red Bull's ruthless pace and reliability this year, they could break a tradition 73 years in the making. Never in the history of the sport has only one constructor won every race in a season. if you consider the Indy 500 in the 1950s and 60s an official race, which I do because it was one. If that were to happen, we would have a new definition for the word domination when it comes to Formula 1. The MP44 and F2004 would still be legendary cars, but the RB19 in the hands of Max Verstappen would become the car when we think of excellence in Formula 1. And so, here is the list to look out for as we watch the second half of this season. I've only been focusing on personal records for Max, but obviously there are a few Red Bull team ones that could be mixed in too. In 10 more wins, they will tie Williams for number 4 all time as constructors with the most wins. And they are already on the longest ever win streak by a constructor, 13 races. If you think I missed anything, please let me know down below. And I'd like to know if you think Max Verstappen can win every single race for the rest of this season. As always, I've been Mr. V. Follow on Twitter, follow on Instagram, do whatever you want to do. I have a Patreon if you like such a thing. Why not? Leave a like down below if you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until that time though, I'll see you guys later.